Okay, so what we've got here is the eThuto stream page, so the activity stream page. So this is where you come in when you log in. This is your first page that you see. So Collaborate is integrated into our courses, which means we cannot access it via the tools section here. We have to go into a course, and each course is assigned its own room for Collaborate. So you go into one of your courses, whichever course you want to have. Now I'm just using one of my test pages. Now I've already got a link here for Collaborate, so let's delete that so that we can start from scratch. Now I know a lot of you already know how to do this, so bear with us. So we just go through the basics real quickly, and then we'll go on to the more troubling things. Okay, so with anything else on the menu, Collaborate is a tool. So to add it, a quick link to the tool, you can add tool link. Now remember to make sure that if you don't see that plus, it's possible that your edit mode is off. Now I get this quite often. People forget to check the edit mode, and then they think there's something wrong because they can't access their add menu item button, and then it's just because your edit mode is off. So always check that. All right, so add menu item, we're going to add a tool link. And in the drop-down menu, we are going to select Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. And you can give it whatever name you want. I see a lot of you are calling it video lessons or video conferencing or video rooms. That's fine. As long as your students know what to look out for, you can give it whatever name is suitable to your practice. I'm going to make this one straight away available to users, but if it's something you don't want them to use just yet, you can leave it hidden and show it later. And with all new things, it's going to show up at the very bottom of my menu, and I can move it around by hovering my cursor over the left side until I have the 4 arrows, and then grab and drag it to wherever I need it. So I'm going to put this one just below Connect Yard here, because maybe it's something I use often. All right, so once you have created your tool link, you and your students can now access Collaborate. So we click on Collaborate, and it's going to open up the dashboard for us. And you can see, as I don't really actively use this page for students, this is my demonstration page. There's not a lot going on here. I've got just one upcoming session. Now, here is one thing that has been confusing a lot of you is you think that your sessions that have been scheduled are missing. It's not. It just filters it by upcoming and previous. So if you want to see your previous session, so the moment the session has ended, it will not show up on this first page anymore. You need to toggle your filter from upcoming to previous sessions. So a lot of you have been thinking that your sessions have gone missing. They don't. They all stay right here on the page for the entirety of the year that the page is active. They will be here. They are just under previous settings instead of upcoming sessions. You can also search sessions by range. So if you have a lot of sessions and you know exactly when that session was, you can say, I want to search by range and I want it to be in between these 2 time frames. Okay, I'm going to just leave it on upcoming. Now, the next thing is another thing that has been confusing a lot of you. So I want you to really focus on this next couple of minutes. There is a course room available by default. The course room is an open session that you can access and your students can access when it's available anytime. And I want you to kind of think, I don't know if many of you are, you know, how often you use Zoom, for instance, but if I open up my Zoom, just to give you an idea, in Zoom, we have a meeting button where you can open up just a random meeting and you can schedule a meeting. Now, that's kind of the same what this is. The course room meeting is an open space and it's open always and there's no settings to it. You just join and it takes you to the course room and your students can do the same thing if it's available. Now, this is fantastic if you have little impromptu sessions or you just quickly want to get your students in a room and record it. And honestly, you can use this all the time as your main session room. The only problem is, and why I don't normally recommend using the main course room, is because the recordings are stashed in one place and they are just set up by dates and not by titles, because we don't title this. It always stays the course room. And that is a bit confusing for you if you want to stack your recordings. That's why I normally don't use the course room and many of you don't. But now what I've been getting is students get confused and they want to enter the course room when in fact they should be entering a session. If you find that this happens to you, that your students are accidentally going into the course room, you can make it unavailable. So just go to its little drop-down menu and lock it. And then your course room is locked. Otherwise, if this is something that you love using, it's really great for, like I say, those impromptu, you know, a student calls you up and says, can you please show me this really quickly? And you say, yeah, go into the Collaborate course room. And, you know, it's already set up. You don't have to go and bother with settings or anything. It's just a quick video conference space. Then you can leave it unlocked, or you can unlock it before you want a student to be able to come in. So it is really great space for that, but it does confuse often when students are not sure where they're supposed to go. They go to the course room instead of to the session they are supposed to go. So remember that the course room, it's always available by default. You can go and make it unavailable, lock it. It works exactly the same as any other session, only it's not titled. And if you do have recordings of it, they will all go into the same recording space. Okay, I don't have any recent recordings. Let's check the whole year. And they will all be stacked like so without having a name. So that session name will come up as course room, and you'll always have recording 1, recording 2 under course room instead of having its own unique name. And that's why I say it's not always the best to use the course room for your classes. Rather schedule your classes so that they are titled, but the course room is lovely for if you just want a quick space to talk. But just make sure that your students aren't confusing it with the sessions. All right, so let's create a session real quick. So I've got one here that I always have available. It's a test session that I always leave open. And it's nice to have a space like this as well that you just have open always. But let's create a session with some more strict rules. So I'm going to say create session. All right, let me just minimize this a little bit so we've got more space. There we go. All right, and you can see again, as with everything on Blackboard, the orange asterisk indicates the required fields. So we have to put in a session name. I'm going to call this one 1 October. This can be whatever, it can be lesson 1, lesson 2, chapter, whatever you prefer. And now you'll see that we've got 2 tabs here. The first is event details, and the second is settings. So kind of think of this as the settings are the nitty-gritty things like, do I record, allow recordings or things like that. And the event details are things like the start date, exit date, and so on. Now, one thing we have available on Collaborate, which is great, is guest access. This means that even if you have a user or someone that you want to be part of your session that is not enrolled in this specific subject, you can still give them access like you would have done with a Zoom session or a Teams meeting or something like that. So all I have to do is check the guest access box. Now, don't worry, it's going to only generate the link as soon as I save the session because the links are unique. So don't worry about that just now, we'll come back to it. And then we assign a guest role. So what is the guest? So the person who follows the link, what are their roles going to be inside the session? Now, if you, for instance, have a guest lecturer coming in, you don't want them to only be a participant because they might want to share their screen. So they are going to be a presenter. Or if it's maybe a lecturer from another, another subject coming in to help you and they need all of the privileges that you have, then you make them a moderator. If they are just participants that are just going to have a look at your session, they're not going to present themselves, they don't need anything else, you can leave it on participant and they will have the same privileges as all of the rest of the students coming in. Okay, so be sure to assign your guest role appropriately. Don't worry too much about this. I always say when it comes to the students as well, here we have the default attendee role. People are always a little bit nervous because they think if I add them as participants, I won't be able to let them share their screen. But even if you add all of them as participants, you can allow individual members to share their screen by changing their roles within the session. I'll show you how to do that now. So don't panic too much about this. Leave it as participants. You can always change it within the session itself. Okay, so that is guest access. We'll give that link a little bit later. And now we've got our start and end date. Now, this is another thing that I get quite often. So please have a listen here. If you have an end date And the end date, let's say, for instance, we're going to open up the session now. That's fine. We leave the start date and we're going to end it. Let's say we end it also today and we're going to end it at 4. Okay, here's the trick though. Up until 4 o'clock, I can go back and change any of my settings. Okay, so if I forgot to allow recording of downloads, I can still change that up until 4 o'clock. Anything afterwards, I need to change the whole event to be able, so I need to forward the end date to be able to change any settings. So remember that. If you want to keep your dates the same, make sure that all of your settings things are properly adjusted to whatever you needed up until that date. So always make sure that you well, just try and make sure to get your settings correct the first time, but you can still change them up until the end date. And there is even a way after that. We just change the end date, but that kind of affects your stats, so it's not a very good idea to change it afterwards, but it is possible and it's not the end of the world, but try and get that beforehand. All right, so I'm going to have the session here. You can have a no end session, but this is difficult for recordings because then it's difficult to get your recordings because the recordings are and the stats are generated after the end session. So no end sessions aren't really a great idea, but you can have that. I have this one, for instance, as an open session that I just leave for testing. If you want a session like that, that's fine. But if there are classes and things where you want your reports and your stats and your video recordings and so on, I'd rather give it an end date. It's just cleaner the way your stats are presented and so on. Okay, you can repeat the session. This is great if you have weekly classes and things like that. You can say, I repeat this every day, every week, every month. Although remember, it's also going to be confusing with your recordings and things because they're all going to go under the same session and you'll have to keep track of them. It's not impossible. It's not even that hard, but I have found people who get a little bit confused over to, which of the sessions the recordings and the stats and the reports belong to. So just keep that in mind. But otherwise, it's great. You just say repeat session. You say when they repeat weekly, maybe they repeat for, the next 3 weeks or whatever the case may be, depending on your schedule. Okay. Early entry. So when would you like students to be allowed to enter? Now, if you need to upload documents for students to download, it's good to give yourself a couple of extra minutes, so maybe 30 minutes before start time, because you can't enter a session until this time. So in other words, 30 minutes before your start time, or 45 or an hour, or no early, which means they can only get in exactly on the dot that your start time is. So it's a good idea to give yourself some extra time if you have to upload documents that students need to access, or if they have to upload documents if they're presenting or anything. Otherwise, if it's just a normal class lesson, 15 minutes should be fine. Remember, because you're probably going to be sharing your screen, you're not actually uploading documents, the PowerPoint for them. So it might not be needed to have 30 minutes or so. So that is for early. You can put in a little description. Why are we meeting? You've got something that you can put in there. Maybe they've got some prep work that they need to do or something like that. Okay, so these are your event details. Now let's move over to the session settings. The first thing we need to worry about is what are the attendees' roles going to be when they come in. Now, like I said, we can change this within the session, so it's not set in stone once we've decided here. Normally for a student, you want them to be a participant. This means they cannot share their screen. And they are just merely there to listen. They can ask questions or share their video. I'll show you now, that's here, but they won't be able to present in the sessions. Okay, if you want them to be able to present, in other words, share their PowerPoint or PDF or whatever documents, you need to toggle that to presenter mode. This will allow the students to then share their screen and speak into the microphone, etc., as a presenter. You could also make them moderators. I wouldn't. That will give them all of the privileges that you have. In other words, they can change roles, they can change settings, they can do everything. So you don't want to do that really for your default attendee role. But you can do it if you have a student that you use as a moderator or something. You can do it in the session. Now, the next one is very important, recording. Please always remember this. Allow recording downloads before you start the session. This means that you and your students will be able to download the recording and watch it later at their leisure. And the reason I say it's important to check this is our students do not always have access to internet anywhere. So for them to only be allowed to stream a session means that they have to go somewhere, sit for an hour in a library or, one of these hotspots that you get, or like have coffee at Spur or whatever, to be able to stream the recording, whereas they can just quickly download it if you allow, and then they can go home or wherever and watch it at their leisure. So always have them download the recordings. It's just, I do understand that a lot of you are worried about copyright issues. And I know that the work you present to your students is your own work, and you don't really want them to be able to distribute it. But to be honest, it's not like they will distribute it. There will be certain circumstances we don't want to do this, and I get that. But if it's just a normal weekly lesson and the student wasn't able to join the session, allow them to download the recording so that they can watch it anywhere, because they really don't have great data packages to just sit at home and watch very large videos. All right. Now, if you don't check this, it won't be allowed. So remember that, to check this beforehand. Otherwise, neither you nor the students will be able to download the recordings, and it will only stay on the cloud. And we have cloud access for a semester for each subject. So every 6 months, our cloud storage will be deleted. So make sure to download your recordings if you want to keep them longer than that. We are in the process of purchasing a video repository license, which is going to be unlimited, and it stays forever, and it's very nice software. It's called Panopto. We are in the process. I think we're actually almost there, and it's going to be linked to eThuto and Microsoft and everything. So all your recordings go to one place. It's very nice. So I'll let you know as soon as we have access to that. But for now, just make sure that you can download your recordings and that you save them in your cloud. You all have OneDrive accounts for up to, I think, 1 terabyte. So maybe you can go and store them there. All right, the next thing for recording is anonymize the chat messages. Now, this is an important thing to think about. We don't often think of this, but this year with the POPI Act, I think all of us started thinking about these things again. So in other words, the chat box in the session, does it show the students' names or not in the recording? So it's going to show the names in the session itself, but in the recording later, is it going to show the chat messages? Now, I like to do this if I'm going to upload that to YouTube or something, because then when I have that video on YouTube, it doesn't show the user's chats in the chat boxes, the name, sorry. So think of this is a privacy issue, and it is completely dependent on what you're doing with the information, etc. If it's just for your class, I don't see the need for it. But if you are afraid, I mean, there's no harm in anonymizing it. Students don't need to see who put the chat in. They really just need to see the answer to the question. So you can just always check that. All right, moderator permissions. So can only show profile pictures for moderators. So this is the profile picture of the student that they've uploaded to the eThuto. So in other words, when we are in the session, can everyone see this profile picture, or can only a moderator see it? Now, again, this is a privacy issue. So again, this is something that you have to go and decide for yourself whether or not that is checkable or not. So if you don't want students to be able to see each other's profile pictures for privacy reasons, then check this box, and only you as the moderator will be able to see those pictures. Next one up is participant permissions. Share audio, video, chat messages, and draw on the whiteboard. So these are just permissions. So if all your default attendee roles are going to be participants, these are your students, what are they allowed and what are they not allowed? So maybe you don't want them to share their video, or you don't want them to be able to draw on the whiteboard. I always uncheck this, because the moment they realize they can draw on the whiteboard, it's a graffiti field day. It might be fun sometimes, but it can get quite distracting. So this is one that I always uncheck. But again, it depends on your class, your practice, and your discipline. So you can decide. If you share audio and video, remember they still have they can still mute and not show their video. This just allows them to unmute or show their video. So it doesn't mean that they are going to constantly be chattering in your ear. They can still mute themselves and stop the video, but this will allow them to unmute themselves and start their video in case they need to ask a question or show something or anything like that. Post in the chat messages, self-explanatory. Do you want them to have a chat box where they can chat? There we go. And draw on the whiteboard we discussed. This one is pretty old school. In some of the first world countries, they still have a lot of landlines. So this is why they have it. So if you want them to join the session using a telephone, in other words, a proper telecom landline, they can call in to the session, but remember they will only be able to hear the audio. So if you are showing a PowerPoint presentation, this isn't really helpful. And I don't know if any of the students even have, landlines anymore. But yeah, that is what that is about. So you can, if you check this box, when we save it, it will give you the number they can call at the time the session starts, and they will be able to hear all of the audio for the session, but they won't obviously be able to see anything. So this does not refer to cell phones. This literally refers to old school telephones. Cell phones, obviously, students can use them to enter the session as with anything else. You know, they have, they just go into their browser, go into eThuto, same way they would have done from a computer. And in fact, most of our students do enter, we find, Collaborate on mobile devices such as cell phones or tablets, because they already have microphones and webcams built into their devices, whereas they might not always have these for their, you know, their computers. Most of the lab computers on campus, for instance, don't actually have microphones and webcams. We are working towards changing that. All right, so that's what that is. Private chat. So when you open, we already said there's allowed to be chat messages, but can they privately chat with each other? In other words, if there's 20 of us in there, some of them can make a little group and start a chat privately and chat behind the scenes. In other words, the moderators cannot, it's not part of the main chat. So you can allow that or not. So not allowing it means you check the box. So they can only chat privately with you as the moderator, you and other moderators in your group. So that's the only private chats they can do. So they cannot chat privately with other participants. And if you don't have that, you can say that moderators have to supervise all private chats. This means that those private chats are not that private. You as the moderator sees all of it. Okay, so that's just private chatting. And then profanity filter. It tries and finds any swear words. If it recognizes a swear word, it just changes little asterisks and it hides them. It's pretty good. We've tested it. It doesn't obviously take swear words in other languages than English, so you can get away with some Afrikaans or Sotho or so swear words, but it catches the English ones pretty great. So you can just check that anyways. I mean, you don't know when you're going to need it. Hopefully our students are not the type to do things like that, but you can. All right, that is it for our session settings. So we've got our event details, we've got session settings, we're ready to create our session. Now that we've created our session, when we go back to event details, we see that link that I was talking about. Remember I said for the guest role, we first have to finish the session before it generates a unique link. So I'm going to just copy that link by going to the little copy icon. So these two little squares on top of each other is normally the copy icon. I'm going to click it. Control C to copy, and it should be on my desk. And what happens now is you send this link to your guests. So anyone who does not have access to this specific eThuto page, and they just go to a browser, paste it in, and it works the same as it would have done with a Zoom session or anything like that. They type in their name, join the session, and it's the same as with anything else. All right, so I'm just going to exit here quickly. Exit. Okay, now obviously it didn't do what I wanted it to do, so let's try again. Now this is something that happens sometimes. I haven't been able to replicate it exactly, so we save and then exit. No, sometimes when we do this, it says your session is not saved, discard session or something like that. And it's something that happens every now and again. And as I say, I haven't been able to replicate how it actually happens. It just sometimes happens. Don't worry about it. We've tested it. Even if you say, yes, discard settings, it doesn't actually discard the settings. Let's change something. Let's see if that helps. Okay. And then exit. No, okay. It's typical. Whenever I do demonstrations, you know, these things never happen. But sometimes when you change something, you come back to a session and you edit it and you exit, it says your session has not been saved, even though you have clicked save. So here, you've clicked save. It said your changes are saved. And then when you exit, it says changes are not saved, discard changes. So this happens sometimes. Don't worry about it. If you saw that little green tick here that said your changes are saved, it is saved. I'm not sure what happened. Maybe they have fixed it now because we've been complaining about it for a month now. But if that happens, don't worry too much about it. It's just a glitch that we're still trying to figure out. Okay, so this is my session now. It's in progress, as we can see. Now, if we don't have an end date, it will just say available like this one. But if it has a start and end date, it will say in progress. Or as when 16:30, so 4:30 this afternoon, this session will move to previous sessions when it's finished. Okay, so students come in. Let's Let's do a mock-up of students. And this is the same way for you to come in into the session. You have your menu, you go to Collaborate, and you go to this session in progress and join session. Now we have a video for students to show them how to do this. We have a video for you as well on the YouTube channel, so they know how to do this. Also, it's pretty friendly. I don't find students ever having problems joining sessions. You know, they're cleverer than we are with technology, so they normally get in okay. All right, so let's have a look now at Collaborate itself. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly enter as my student account so that we have at least one person in the room. Right, so this is a student account that I have for demonstration. So this account has exactly the same privileges as our students, so it works the same way. So a student will come into the account, into the session, Collaborate Ultra, go to their session, join the session. It's going to open in a new tab. They're going to be prompted to test their video and audio the same as you are. I think I've already entered into this course, so it only prompts the first time. So this is my student account. Now I can start my video because that was allowed. Remember in those settings we, oh, sorry, I've got something here on my other screen saying that because I'm using Zoom, it's not allowing me to do this. But if we weren't using Zoom at the moment, I would be able to share my audio and share my video because remember in the settings, we said that that is okay. We allow students to do that. And students also have their little menu item here. They can do private chats because remember we allowed that. So I find someone to chat with, you know, I find a friend and we can chat, or I go to the everyone chat and I chat here. And don't worry about chat. Your students will figure out chat faster than you can imagine. They love a little bit of a chat box. They will be in here before the session even properly starts. Here they can also see who is attending. Here they can share content. Now, because this student is not a presenter, they can't share because we didn't allow them. I'm going to show you from the other end now how we change that. And then they've got some settings, so they can go and check out their video and their audio settings and make sure that everything is okay. That's why it's good to sometimes have the session open 15 or 30 minutes beforehand. Then your students can come and do this beforehand, especially if they are going to be presenting and they will be needing to speak through their microphones. All right, so this is the student side. Let's go back to my side. Oh, sorry, I've got student preview mode on. Now this is the student and I can see them there, and this is me as the lecturer. So now I've got different setups in the chat. I can see that students chat and I can say, it's kind of weird, I'm talking to myself. You can put in your chats here as well. Now, remember, we said that we're not having the profile picture shown. So that's why I can't actually see the student's profile picture here, even though if we go back to Edge, they have a profile picture. Okay, so what we're going to do now is look at what attendee roles we can have. So this is me as the instructor. That's why I don't have these little dots next to it. I don't have any controls. And these two icons are experience. Now, experience relates to video feed, audio feed, and general internet connectivity. So you will be able to see if a student is not getting a really good experience. If they have a bad internet connection, you know, they might only have one little line. It's going to turn to red if it's a low one, and it's going to be green if it's like the first three. So it changes colors here as well. So you can actually see if your students are struggling with these little icons, but both these are okay. So that's fine. Now, if you want to change a student, remember we've got two participants. We made the attendees participants. So if you want to change that at any time, you can go to the attendee controls and change. Wait, why am I on a preview mode? Sorry, let me just go back in. It had me as a student instead of the instructor. All right, so let's go back. So to participants, All right, that's what it's supposed to look like. Sorry, I was still in student preview mode and I didn't even realize it. Quite bad. Okay, so that's me, the moderator. This is the student. Now I had all the attendees by default come in as participants. So what I'm going to do is I want this one single student to be able to present. So I'm going to change the attendee controls to make presenter. And this way now the student will be able to, from their end, to actually present. So if I go back to that student view, if I go to share content now, this time it says, yes, now you are allowed to share content. So they can share application or screen. This is if they want to share a PowerPoint or a PDF or anything like that. They can share files if it's something that they want you to download, or share their camera, not the camera that they feed here, but a different kind of camera. So if they have a demonstration that they want to show you and somebody is hooked in and they are taking a video of themselves, for instance, or of course a blank whiteboard. Okay, so remember, we can always change. So if I go back, I can make this student also a moderator, but that will give the student all of the privileges that I have, which means they can change other attendees' roles. They can see all the chat messages. So don't do that unless it's someone that you really trust. Otherwise, presenters fine. That means they can do everything they need to do. Or I can toggle them back to participant. And if we go back, again, I can share nothing. Okay, so remember that for when your students are presenting. Participant is fine for just normal classes. You will only need to change it to present if they need to present something from their end. All right, so don't worry about these inactive users. That's just saying that I have other users in this course that have left, but that was just me playing around, so don't worry too much about that. We can see under the attendees if we need to find someone. We only have 2, but I know some of you have classes like 400 and upwards. So if you need to see if someone's in the class, you can just quickly use the find search box to find that student. This is something that I completely love, is you can mute them all at once. So sometimes when you allow them to use their audio and it gets a bit out of hand, you can just mute them all at once and say, okay, wait, we're done now. That's quite nice. And you don't have to go and mute each one separately. Right, so you'll see that this pop-up came up right the minute we entered. That's the recording. We can record from the pop-up. If you missed it, you can also record from here. Start the recording. Session is being recorded. And then when you want to stop the recording, you can either stop recording, or when you exit the session, it will stop recording automatically. Okay. Right, so down here we've got the little raise hand things, but don't worry about it, your students will see it. So if a student raises their hand, there's the student, I'm raising my hand. From the instructor's side, you will see it as a pop-up like this. And you see that Leandre is asking a question. If you have answered the student's question, you can manually lower their hand for them, or otherwise they will do it from their end. Okay, so I'm not too sure that we'll need to go into the session, the settings. These are the technical things like your audio and video settings, notifications, things like that. These are pretty straightforward and, they make sense. Audio notification when somebody joins the room. And this is quite annoying if that happens. I always switch this off because if people are late, it keeps beeping on your end every time somebody comes into the room. So you can go and look at some of these, but I don't think it's something we need to go through. They're pretty straight up. You can just decide when it makes a noise, when it doesn't make a noise, things like that for your notification settings. Session settings, you can go and have a look at some of these. Any of the settings that you want to change during the session and so on. All right, I think I have covered everything, but please feel free to ask me to cover something if I missed it. So I'm going to open up for questions. I just want to have a quick look at the chats. I've got a question: if attendees could switch off their videos. Oh, can we please ask everyone to stop their videos, those who have videos? I've done a couple now. All right, I think I've got all of them. Right, okay. I'm going to open up for questions now. Please feel free to unmute yourself. I've got the chat box open if you rather want to type into the chat box. Hit me with anything you need to know about Collaborate. And then if we have asked all of the Collaborate questions and we've got some time, you're welcome to ask me any other eThuto questions. We are here till 12:30. So while we're waiting for someone to formulate a question, I touched on it briefly earlier. I just want to make sure that you caught that. This is where we find the recordings. So here at the top, we've got either sessions. That's where we access our settings. Sessions, and then we have recordings, and this is where we access the recordings. So this is the same for you as it is for students. They also have these two, and they go either between sessions or recordings, and then they can download their recordings from here if you allowed it, or watch it straight off. So just if we missed that in the beginning, I think I went over that a little bit quickly.
Hello.
Hi, please feel free to go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, I have a question to ask you.
Yes.
I don't know what one is supposed to do when you are in Collaborate. There are cases where I want to demonstrate the running of a model, and I use the share, the screen. And then each time the model, maybe the results have changed, I need to click on the next to show the results. I can't directly go there for them to see unless, again, I stop sharing and upload the new page. Is there a way in which I can be able to?
So let me show you that. So when we share, we have the option to share an application. Where is share? We're supposed to be able to share my whole screen. There we go. Sorry, it's in the same space. Okay, so share application or screen. Now, the difference is if I share the screen, like so, anytime I go to a different account, so I'm going to share this screen of mine now. So it's the screen that we're on currently. So if I go to another page, you can see the Hall of Mirrors effect happening because I'm showing what I'm also sharing on, let's stop that. Or we can share a window of something. So if I share, for instance, this window, I'm not even sure why that's open. It's only going to share this window. And if I want to move to another application or another program or another tab or another window, it's going to cause me to have to stop sharing and reshare. And I think this is what's happened to you is let me just go back. You share the application or the window as opposed to the entire screen. So you want to share the entire screen if you're going to be going back and forth between programs or windows or tabs or pop-ups or anything like that. Also, remember that if you want to share the audio on your screen, so if you're going to be playing a video and you want that audio to come through, to make sure to check that little box there. It's kind of hidden here at the bottom. And then when you share, it's also going to share the audio coming from your screen.
Oh, okay. Okay. So the trick is if I'm going to be changing, then I just have to share it as a computer, not really as a window. Yeah, share the entire screen, not just the window, especially if you're going to have pop-ups. Even if it's in the same program, pop-ups seem to assume themselves as different applications. And this is something that always annoys me. So I just always share the screen, the entire screen. You know, the reason why you have the option to just share windows in case you have something you don't want the participants to see accidentally. My advice is just close all the other things. So if you have a memo or something like that, close anything you don't want them to see and just share the entire screen. It's just easier. Okay. Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, no problem. We've got a question from Prof. Makura. How long do the recordings stay there? They stay for a semester, so 6 months. So you need to download them and place them in your own archives in that time. Like I said earlier in the session, we are working on purchasing a video repository. So it's kind of like a YouTube channel, but for CUT. So it's its own YouTube space kind of thing. And we're going to integrate it with Blackboard and Microsoft. So any recordings will go automatically and easily to your subjects and things like that. So I'll let you know when that is up and running. It's going to be probably a while because it's quite expensive. So, you know, 1 million people has to sign off before you can buy it, but we'll do training when that is in. So for the moment, please make sure to download your recordings as they only stay on cloud space for 6 months. All right, next question. I've got a couple of hands up here. Just get up. Okay, hands have been lowered, so I think maybe I answered the question accidentally. Next question in the chat from Polani. Thank you for the session. Used it 3 times during first semester in one of the subjects. However, I did not check whether I can be able to download the register like on Teams. I was taking screenshots and I do not know how to navigate other applications. Okay, so register, let's have a look at that. So when you finished your session,
you can go into the session. So this is my session. Now, possibly your session will be a previous session, not an upcoming session now, because you've already had your session. But if it was one that you left open or it's still in progress, it will be on the screen. So go to your previous sessions, and then any one of your sessions, you go to your three little dots. I always call them Susatis, and view reports here. Now here you'll be able to see how many attendees you've had. Now, this is not a lot. It's just because I use this as a test page. View the report, you can see the attendees that joined. You can export that attendees list to a CSV file or print it to a PDF file. And it has a session ID here. Now, this session ID is not really important. We used this when there was a problem to identify the session, so don't worry too much about that. You might want to download your register for Excel or for PDF here. So let's go through that again. Go to your session. It's probably going to be a previous session. Then go to the three dots, view reports. That session never ran. Let's try one that actually had something. View report, you can see the amount of attendees. There's the polls that I had. So if you had polls in your session, that's where you download them. And there we have PDF or Excel. All right, next question. Can I record a lesson beforehand and only make it available during class? Unfortunately, you can do that. Unfortunately, Collaborate doesn't have a really great screen recording. So it depends on what you're going to record. I would rather use Zoom, but yes, you can. So what you do is you open up a session, but you don't have any other participants but yourself in here. So in other words, you make up a session for yourself. So for instance, I have this session that I told you earlier I like to use for tests. So I'm just going to go to upcoming. This one is my test session that I just always leave open. So you go into a session and you are the only person here. Just wait for it. Now we start the recording. You go and share your screen, your presentation, your face, whatever it is that you're recording. You keep recording. You stop the recording. And then that video is basically you doing the class without any participants in the room. And then you can share that later. So you can download it and share it later with your students. However, I think Zoom does this better. So if you're not going to have a class longer than 40 minutes, because that's the limit we have on Zoom free accounts, I'd rather do it with Zoom because it records better quality 1080p, whereas Collaborate only records 720. But it's your choice. Go and play with both maybe. I mean, this is a trick you can do with any video conferencing. So you can do this with Skype, Teams, anything. You just have yourself in the room, no one else, you record it, and it's basically like recording a lesson without any students in it. Okay, once in a while my slides are interfered with by attendees. That is what I was talking about, Prof. I hate that. So remember when we went to the session settings, we have in the settings, so not the event details, the settings, we have this draw on whiteboard and files. Uncheck that. So this is one of the participant permissions, and earlier I said they always find it and it always turns into this graffiti, go for it. You know, everyone has a lot of fun, and it can be fun, but it's just very distracting. So uncheck that box because they find it quickly and then they start drawing on your files and things like that. So uncheck that before the session and you won't have that problem again. Okay, I've gotten to the end of the questions in the chat. Do we have any more questions, or does anyone whose question I answered want a bit more elaboration, or anyone else want to ask? Please unmute yourselves, put it in the chat. Raise your hand, whatever feels best, go for it. There we go. Finally, I get this. Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier. Sometimes this happens when you have saved your session, and we find that then just say, yes, discard changes, and don't worry, your sessions, we've checked it now over and over. They are in fact saved, but for some reason that pops up sometimes, even if you have saved. So just say yes, discard. We find that your session settings are in fact saved. Okay. Anyone questions?
Yes, I have one last question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hello. Leandra, I have a problem with one particular software I'm using. When I try to share it on Collaborate, it doesn't share, it just prints out a black screen. And my student can't see it.
Okay.
So I don't know what is the problem.
What is it that you're sharing? Is it a document or is it a screen?
It's the application.
It's an application. What application is it?
It's a computer software that we use to do analysis of hydraulics.
All right.
So that one, I don't think you can answer it on this platform.
No, I'm not going to be able to answer that. But if you can email me the software name, I can go to the Blackboard Collaborate forum and ask the developers. They know which softwares are excluded, and then I can find out for you. But off the top of my head, I've never experienced it where certain software applications don't show. So if you just send me that name, I'll find out for you.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Right, it seems like everyone is happy. Let me just make sure in the chats. Now I've got everything here. So I think we can stop the session there today. I've got 10 minutes more scheduled, so I'm going to stop this recording now. And